How can Ireland maintain law and order when we ask criminals to self-deport without even checking if they've complied or not? This is Ben Scallon and you're watching Gript Media. Ireland has some fairly weird policies when it comes to law and order, but this might take the cake. Recently, we saw the case of former Waterford resident Chico Macamda from Angola, who was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison after being convicted of sexual assault, false imprisonment and robbery in Dublin the year before. He had 15 previous convictions for crimes such as exposing himself to 2 teenage girls in Kerry, dragging a woman down a lane and cornering her by some bins, punching another woman in the stomach multiple times and masturbating in front of her after she was knocked to the ground and hit her head on the concrete, and much more. Of the 7.5 years he was handed by the judge, the last 2 were suspended and he was allowed to go free from the jail on the condition that he deport himself from the country within 2 weeks of his release. And by the way, as soon as he was let out, he reportedly decided to urinate at the prison gates. A class act all around. That's what some people might call taking the piss. Now, this decision by the courts to release such an offender might seem puzzling to some people. After all, when you have somebody convicted of serious crimes, why would you leave it up to them to deport themselves? Would you, for example, ask a criminal to escort themselves to prison? Well, no, because that would seem mental. So what is going on here exactly? Well, the answer can be found in a clip from 2018 of Inish Director General Michael Curran. Curran is the head of the Irish Immigration Service at the Department of Justice, and in 2018 he said that when a deportation order is issued in Ireland, the onus is on the person to self-deport. The authorities don't do it themselves.
How many persons are deported by the state per annum? And how many persons receive deportation orders?
I don't have the precise figures available for you, but in approximate figures, I can say normally in a year we would issue about 1,000 deportation orders, and from memory I'm trying to think about 140 or 50 would have been affected in a particular year. Now I'd have to say that a deportation order, when issued, the obligation is on the person to remove themselves from the state.
Now, at this point, the first obvious question that would come to most people's minds is how many of these criminals actually do self-deport? Is it 90%, 10%? What's the figure? It seems like fairly basic info, right? Well, let's ask Michael Curran and see if he can clarify this for us.
So the obligation is on people to remove themselves from the state, and many people do. And therefore, it's not the case that every deportation order that's issued is automatically comes to the point where it requires the removal of a person from the state. Many people voluntarily remove themselves. We can't be precise about how many actually do because we don't have exit checks at the country.
We can't be precise about how many actually do leave the country because we don't have exit checks. I'm just going to let that sit for a moment while you absorb that information. It almost beggars belief. At a certain point, you have to ask yourself, what kind of a society convicts a criminal of a serious offense and then orders them to punish themselves without even checking if they do or not? I think most people would agree that such a society has completely lost touch with basic reality. And this is not an isolated incident, mind you. Imagine for a moment, if you will, a van full of armed alleged assassins driving on a country road to execute a target with the potential to cause, quote, dozens of casualties. No, this isn't a promo for a Hollywood action movie. It was a reality for the people of County Offaly relatively recently. In May of 2020, Irish media told of a Brazilian murder squad, that's their term, not ours, who were intercepted by police while allegedly trying to kill a traveller in Clara, County Offaly. The 4 men admitted to wielding submachine guns and sawn-off shotguns, and as reported by Extra.ie, a senior source told the Mail, if these men had opened fire with a submachine gun up in that housing estate, it could have been absolute carnage considering all the families based up there. There could have been dozens of casualties. As shocking as this was, however, the key piece of info came from The Independent. The court heard that Da Silva, one of the men, has 24 previous convictions in Ireland which include offences for theft and possession of knives. He has also been the subject of a deportation order since July 2019, having entered the country on a holiday visa. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison initially for firearms charges, and an extra year was later added for drug dealing. Once again, this man was supposedly deported in 2019, and yet here he was in 2020, a year later, running around the country with machine guns, apparently trying to shoot up rural housing estates and potentially kill Irish citizens. In fact, according to the ESRI, even when a person goes through direct provision, if their asylum claim is found to be fraudulent and they're ordered to leave the country, 80% of those people end up staying in Ireland. Only 20% are actually removed from the country, and this has been going on for years. Even back in 2012, a decade ago, there was a case of a Polish national who pleaded guilty to 7 counts of sexual assault against 6 women on Dublin bus. As reported in The Independent, the Polish national pleaded guilty to 7 charges of sexual assault on dates between January 2007 and May 2011. He assaulted one woman twice on 2 different buses. However, Ronicki will be a free man despite a 10-year deportation order because he appealed the decision. It is now the subject of a judicial review, and until this is completed, Ronicki will be allowed to roam free. That was a decade ago, so this is not some crazy new problem that's just suddenly sprung up. This has been going on for years, and politicians have done absolutely nothing about it. In fact, they've encouraged it, as Justice Minister Helen McEntee said when offering illegal migrants a pathway to citizenship. Those with an existing deportation order or former student visa holders can also apply for the amnesty. Applicants must be considered to have good character and not pose a threat, but applications are unlikely to be refused for minor offences according to the department. Now, that bit about good character might sound encouraging, but as we know, the Irish state does not have a good gauge of who does and does not pose a threat to society. After all, this is the same justice system which constantly lets sex offenders off with fully suspended sentences. We have endless cases of individuals with dozens of previous convictions for serious offences being given, quote, one last chance by the courts. Not a great judge of character there, it seems. Of course, not all migrants commit crime, and we have plenty of native Irish criminals. We did a whole video here on Gript about the trends of Irish youth violence, and we all know the issues with native Irish drug gangs, so this is not an attempt to pin all the country's woes on migrants or to paint anyone with a broad brush. There are obviously a lot of facets to this problem. But in what possible world does it make sense for criminals who break our laws to still be walking the streets after being quote-unquote deported? If you ask me, somebody should call the European Space Agency. We need a shuttle to bring our leaders back down to Earth from whatever bizarre parallel dimension they currently exist in where this seems to make sense. Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing up for a monthly donation via the link on screen to help us produce more content like this. Alternative media like Gript needs all the assistance it can get, and every donation goes a long way. As always, thanks for watching.